Are we good?
Recording in progress.
Okay, it is now 6:30 PM on Wednesday, April 17th, and I'm calling to order tonight's meeting of the Lewes Planning Commission. Let me begin by just first of all saying we have one commissioner on Zoom, and Deborah, if you wish to say anything, please raise your hand, okay? We have two excused absences, one from Adam and one from Bill. So let me first see if there are any, well, actually, before we go to announcements, I want to congratulate two commissioners who, I guess, I'm not sure when we say you're elected, when there is not going to be an election. But Commissioner Marasco, will be joining City Council, and Commissioner Heffernan, who will be joining BPW. So congratulations, and thank you. Thank you for your continued volunteerism in this community. We have 2 hours before we need to vote again, and that will be at 8:30. And I'm going to ask Blue or Janelle to please give me the signal if I'm not paying attention. I think, I will not jinx us by saying I think our agenda is fairly light tonight. But I think it is kind of light tonight. So let's begin with the minutes. We have 2 sets of minutes, the public hearing of March 20th and our regular meeting of March 20th. Let me first go to the minutes from the public hearing. And does anyone have any?
Yes, I noticed I wasn't listed as being in attendance, and I was there.
Oh, I did not catch that. We need to correct that. You've got that, Janelle, down?
And Jackie should be on.
And is it on both of them? I have to look.
No, I appear on the other one.
Oh, yeah, it looks like you. Okay. Any other edits? I do have one if no one else does.
No.
On the public hearing meeting minutes, under A, call to order and announcements, the second paragraph, last 2 sentences, which read, "This would be property owned by others and not part of the subdivision, period. Because this is not in our purview, it will not be a recommendation." Instead of ending with a period, I believe what I said was it will not be a recommendation concerning approval of the subdivision. I was still saying that we can and would be able to make a recommendation to mayor and city council in general about this topic. Any comments on the second set of minutes from the meeting? No? Okay. Would someone like to move approval of both sets at once? I think we
I
would
move
handle them.
that we approve both sets of minutes.
I second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Unanimously approved. Thank you, Deborah. I shouldn't have said unanimous until I heard for sure from you, okay? Okay, on to unfinished business. C1 is discussion and possible recommendation to mayor and city council regarding adding a non-resident ex-officio member to the Lewes Planning Commission. And I'll look to our council. I would just like you to confirm that we do not need to make a change to code for this, that we can, as a group, decide to do it, so there isn't any text that we have to review. We wanted to give everyone a chance to, ruminate on this. Any comments or discussion?
Just as I was thinking about it, one
aspect of, at least, not that they're a model for anything, but the way Congress does things, is the delegates from the territories actually do have voting authority on committees, on the committees that they are assigned to. Where they don't have voting authority is when it comes to the full body. And I think that is a good precedent to follow here, so that if someone were to volunteer their time to in this capacity, that if they served on the environmental subcommittee or on the open space subcommittee, that they would have full voting authority as a part of that subcommittee. It's just when it came to the full Planning Commission forwarding recommendations on to the mayor and city council that they would not be able to vote then. And would ask for council's advice on that. But that was just a thought as I was ruminating on this.
An interesting thought. Sorry?
It exists now.
Yeah, right now, I think they are voting.
They are,
Yes.
they are
Yes.
voting. There's a
So-
member that's an ex officio in the room who's
Yes.
also on a subcommittee that votes as part of the
Yeah.
subcommittee.
Yeah.
So from our past, as long as you're a subcommittee member, you have the full rights of
Right.
anybody on a subcommittee.
Yeah.
So I think it's a good point. We would want to continue that.
Practice, right?
Hopefully that's helpful.
Any other views? I mean, I feel, my sense was at the last meeting, I don't want to presuppose anything, but it appeared that there was general agreement that this would be a good idea.
Yeah,
Okay.
I feel like it was Commissioner Ennis's idea, or at least that he put forward on the ex officio, was the way to reach the consensus among the group. I think people swayed back and forth, and it was a very good discussion. I know I moved left and right, but I think that ex officio member, or the non-voting member, at that level before it goes,
Yeah.
is the way to ensure that the residents still have the voice. And I
Yeah.
think that's what we were trying to open the tent, but still address that. So I have thought about it greatly, and I really like the recommendation.
Can I have a motion just to put in place that we've agreed on this?
I'll make that motion.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, and let's be clear that what the motion is. The motion is, do you want to read it, Janelle?
Well, I'm just gonna ask, one question for discussion. Do you want to allow one or two, or how many, just one?
Yeah.
To try this out? Okay, I just want to make sure. So, and Alex, does this need to go to mayor and council for consideration?
So I have one question about this. So if someone is not even ex officio, currently do they vote on the subcommittee?
No, you have to be appointed by mayor and council to be actually a member to vote.
Yes.
So like, I'm technically ex officio, Charlie O'Donnell's ex officio, Barbara Curtis is ex officio, Councilperson Ritzert is ex officio. We provide impact, I provide staff, but we do not vote.
I think there's a distinction, though, between voting at the Lewes Planning Commission. So no ex officio member can vote.
Right.
And that would remain the same. But on a subcommittee that we've formed, which is going to bring a recommendation back to us, an ex officio member can vote. Now, there are exceptions to that that are more based on the issues of forced recusal. So, for example, if Councilman Ritzert was attending a subcommittee meeting, he would not vote, because if he was voting, he'd be indicating a strong opinion that would then force him to recuse when that topic came to city council.
So I just want to have some clarification. So on the environmental subcommittee, we have 2 non-residents, that's right, and we have ex officio. Everybody's got an equal voice on the subcommittee, right? It's just as
Yeah.
you're saying, Chair.
Yeah.
And no one feels that they're ex officio.
Yeah.
I mean, Councilmember Ritzert is,
Yeah.
but Ms. Curtis is treated as a full
Yeah.
subcommittee member.
Yeah. And keep in mind, this is where issues are being
Yeah.
thrashed out, and nothing, anything that is going to go to mayor and city council has to be approved by a vote
Right.
of the members
Okay.
of the planning
So do
commission.
you think that when the motion is presented, we should address that subcommittee members can be non-residents? In other words, to clarify it for future subcommittees, maybe we should add that to this?
Yeah.
It's our practice, as
Yeah.
the city planner mentioned, but maybe it just goes with the motion
Yeah.
to clarify.
So I think what we're looking at,
Yeah.
sorry,
So it does not require mayor and council action.
Yeah.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is that the motion, is to approve one non-resident ex officio member to the planning commission without voting ability on the planning commission, but full voting on subcommittees of the
that they are,
planning
that they are
commission.
members of, that they are.
Yes,
that
of
they're appointed to, yeah,
of planning commission subcommittees, that they have voting
Exactly.
rights there, but not as part of the
Uh-huh.
planning commission.
yes,
If I got that right?
okay?
Right.
I think it's,
And I don't know if it's necessary to put language in some of this to the effect of, and fully participate in the deliberations of the Lewes Planning Commission, except for voting. Something, I think we need to make this sort of enticing, for somebody to want to do this, because they're not voting. Something to that effect. I
Yeah,
don't
you,
know.
you want to hear their, 'cause
Yes.
as Liaison Curtis provides comments from BPW, they would have that same information. They would provide their unique perspective on planning items.
yes. Mhm. Okay. Okay, we have a motion on the table. I believe the motion is the motion that was stated by
City planner.
City Planner Cornwell. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Can I hear? Okay. It's unanimous. Thank you. We heard you, Deborah. Thank you. Okay, on to a second item of unfinished business. Discussion and potential public comment regarding accessory dwelling units, ADUs. An ADU is a small secondary dwelling that shares a lot with a larger primary house. And I'm going to turn this item over to the chair of the Housing Subcommittee, Commissioner Heffernan.
Okay, well, sort of a lot has happened. Almost nothing has changed. So at the end of January, and I'll speak for Deborah, who's online, and Bill, who's unavailable, but at the end of January, we came to the conclusion that we were ready to write an ordinance, and we still had, I'll say, 2 items open to be studied, which we did in a subsequent meeting. But we had 14 or 15 points that I reviewed with you before, and basically, the 2 items left open were length of lease. Bill is at 5 months. Deborah is at a year. Bob is sort of, let's make it a year and allow exceptions for sensible things for workforce housing. And rent, we started with guidance from Delaware State Housing at like $800 a month, and $1,000 for 1 bedroom and $1,200 for 2. We've sort of moved that up to $1,000, $1,100, $1,200. So that was all going pretty well, and we were agreeing. And if you reviewed our task as we started it out, it was city has affordable housing in its comprehensive plan. We want to do something. Let's go after the low-hanging fruit. That seems to be ADUs as the first step. And we found a way to limit it that we were very happy with in terms, and that, the terms of that were basically that a parking restriction, a ADU had to fit in with the architecture, including H Park, that there would be a license to have an ADU, and that the homeowner had to live there in one of the units, and that the lease had to meet certain income restrictions I mentioned before. So after 6 months of work, we came to that. And just as we said, Mr. Burns, write that down. Almost the same day, the state Senate introduced 7 bills. The most important is called Senate Bill 23, and I'll pass around a copy of it here in a minute, but that sort of would overrule everything that we had looked at. And so let me pass those around. The senator introduced a whole bunch of bills, but this is the one that matters to us. I mean, the others are about foreclosure and stuff like that. So. Barbie, you want one? And so it's radically different, and here's a couple of them. And you can start reading about the second page where it gets to line 34 or 39. And so having read that, our committee decided we needed to have a meeting with Senator Huxtable, which we did. We did it on April 8th, right during the middle of the eclipse. And it was a good meeting, but I think the best way to really describe it is we were coming from exactly where I said, how do we fit some ADUs in here and come up with something that would pass mayor and city council and fit into the Lewes environment. And Senator Huxtable was coming from the world of, we need more housing in Delaware to solve the homeless problem. Let's just create more housing at a much higher level, much broader brush, and the two are somewhat in conflict. So most of his other bills have made it out of committee. This one is still being studied and probably won't get acted on. And he's very open about that. And he said it will change, and he's gotten comments from, and he listed 6 or 8 larger cities, including Newark and Wilmington and Dover. And so there will probably be some changes. But for a while it sort of paralyzed us. And when we left, after that meeting, Bill and I sort of looked at each other and said, well, let's write ours down and present it to the Planning Commission as a Lewes thing, and see if we can get it up to mayor and city council. And going through the normal process, it would arrive there about June, and then by that time the Senate bill will be in a different form. And I think the senator fully expects it to be in some different form, but he's sort of saying, get ready and go do this. So So that's kind of where we're at. And the other thing I've continued to learn about was I did talk to the guy in East Hampton who's been with that program, East Hampton, New York, for a long time. And I put some of the notes from that in your packet. But I found it very interesting to talk to him, and they have flexed their system. They started out, they flexed their system to make it easier. They flexed their system to make their affordability number 130% of what HUD says it is, to have a larger incentive, and a city council that moves with them, town council that moves with them. So that's where we are and what we've done, and
Are we at the point right now where you feel we can, let me back up for a minute, because one of the questions I had, and I turned to our council, was my understanding is that if the state passes something, that will supersede anything that we have passed locally.
that's my understanding also.
But because, so the only rationale perhaps for moving more quickly or at the speed you're currently moving would be, we don't know when, if or what exactly the state will pass. We know we have some equivalents of ADUs that may currently be illegally in the city. And whatever we would pass would enable us as a community to begin having some of these things be built or come online. So when the state law gets passed, we'd be a little bit ahead of the game in trying to get some affordable housing. And I say this because whatever the state is passing appears to be less restrictive than what we're passing. So it isn't that anyone would be building something that the likelihood would be extremely low that anything that came in under what we passed wouldn't be permitted under what the state would pass, because everything that they're looking at is much, much more liberal in terms of the requirements.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If I could just quickly address that. So just generally, when the state passes a land use law, there's a famous case recently, some of you might be familiar with the city of Lewes versus NEPA, and that dealt with the Lewes Board of Adjustment, and the state restrictions from the Board of Adjustment were less strict than the city of Lewis's restrictions for land use, and the Supreme Court upheld that.
Excuse me, which way?
Sorry, the city was stricter than the state law, and the city law was upheld. And this situation is a little more complicated because it's not simply the state setting the floor for ADUs and cities allowed to make stricter requirements. If you go to line 59 of the bill, it requires local governments to do certain things. So if that's where this bill ended, the city of Lewes could enact stricter regulations on ADUs. However, it also states that local governments may not do certain things. And so it's not clear that a local government can do something stricter.
Yeah, but 59, I think, says a local government may not do any of the following, which are stricter.
That's correct.
Right.
Yeah, that's,
So you're saying if that got passed, we would not be able to do those stricter things?
that's correct. So
Okay.
let me just back up here. Line 48 says local governments must do something.
Yeah.
Right, and then there's certain things that local governments must do, and Lewes would be able to do things stricter than that. And then line 59 says the local government may not do the following things. And so some of those things include line 71, local government may not impose additional zoning regulations on ADUs. So having an ordinance that regulates ADUs at all as far as setbacks or any sort of land use on ADUs is not clearly permissible under this version of the law. So hopefully there's a bit more clarity on how this is going to work. I've spoken to a few lawyers about this, and they have some concerns about how this is going to play out if this version of the bill is adopted.
This is what we called at the federal level preemption. Yeah, I don't know the politics of this, but I'd be surprised if that survived, all the way through. Do we know what the concerns of, we mentioned Newark, Dover, and some of the other, and Wilmington, I guess.
I've heard concerns over local control, and I'm not trying to criticize this at all.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think the intent from my reading is that they are trying to prevent local governments from de facto banning ADUs by making the regulations very cumbersome. But it's just not clear to me what a local government could do as far as ADUs under this version.
And I think Senator Huxtable in a meeting with Bob was clear that two things. Number one, this isn't an affordable housing bill.
Yeah.
He does not look at this as
No,
affordable
he
housing
sees it
bill
as
at all.
housing, yeah.
This is a lift all boats bill, which is put out housing out there, and as a result of putting more housing out there, more people will be housed. So it's a lift all boats bill. Second is that the bill is written so there are few obstacles in front of the homeowner. So, and he was very clear that he doesn't want people to put impediments in front, or governments to put impediments in front of homeowners for doing this. And he considers things like off-street parking, things like short-term leases, those things would be impediments for people to do this. That's why it's written this way, is that he doesn't want to put, he's seen bills in other states apparently that have failed to do what they thought they were going to do because governments put their own regulations on top of them that put impediments to the homeowner. And from a standpoint of practicality, that makes a lot of sense, because we don't want to put impediments in front of homeowners to convert their properties to ADUs unnecessarily.
that's
So,
very helpful.
I guess the question to you, Mr. Burns, and you, Ms. Cornwell, are there any risks with us moving forward on what the subcommittee has come up with? I mean, my understanding is that what we're looking at is something that is likely more restrictive than what the state will come up with.
So from a planning perspective, the state can adopt a law at any point that can impact local jurisdictions, which means that the city's gonna have to amend their codes. So if the city adopts an ADU ordinance, and then the state comes in, then you're just gonna have to go back and amend it to whatever the state is. But that could happen in any legislation that comes from the state.
And if someone has begun building under the code that we've adopted, and then the state, that they have a building permit, they're in process in some way, what happens?
That's a very interesting question, because if the state, so if this ordinance at the city level goes forward, and then the state adopts this version of their bill, the state or individual could argue that the city can't enforce its code. And then it gets complicated.
Yeah, so Newcastle County, Kent County both have accessory dwelling unit ordinances. I think several other towns already have them. The county has a version of an ADU ordinance, and I know they were looking at a broader one. And there are ADUs in Newcastle County. So this isn't just how is this going to impact Lewes. This is going to impact the state. Everybody's going to have to take a look and see what is going to happen. And I think that's what, as Commissioner Heffernan said, the senator expects changes based on conversations he's having with the cities and the counties, because some of them already have ordinances. Newcastle's has been in effect for a very long time, and they have several hundred ADUs that have already been permitted. So how does that impact them?
Correct me if I'm wrong, but the others are not by right?
Yeah.
This is,
Kent County is by right. Certain things in Sussex County are by right. I believe in Newcastle County they're by right, but they have a limit as to the number. And I think just a couple of years ago they actually increased the number of ADUs they could have. I believe there is one city that has it as a conditional use, which actually is a burden to.
And Kent County has a conditional use,
I thought.
and Milton, I think, has conditional.
I think one of the, I think Milford or Milton, one of them has a conditional use. Yes, but others, it's just a permitted use.
I have a question for Alex. Would this preempt an HOA restriction on additional units?
I don't think so. I don't think it would. Generally, the city doesn't get involved with HOA regulations.
The city doesn't.
But the state,
Yeah.
It seems to me we should take the spirit and tone of what is in this bill, not the wording, but the spirit and tone, and move forward. Because we're on our own clock, we're on our own aspiration and vision, and then we'll be one more voice that the state will have to interact with. Waiting doesn't seem as viable to me. But what, I think it's just, as you all have said, they're saying, let's not make it so hard to make this happen. So we should look at our language and what's being proposed and say, have we been too restrictive? And some of the reasons might be that they should stay because of our parking needs or whatever. But I think we should move forward as one other leader of a city that cares about this. And then, like as the city planner said, anything federal or state, you have to sometimes go back and revise your code. I mean, that's just reality on any section of our code. But I think we're making great progress, and I think folks want us to do this, and so we should move forward. But again, with the caution of let's not have a lot of mountains to climb so that this can happen.
now, I know that you've made a lot of progress, and can we get, I think we're really at the point, Mr. Burns, where we need your help working with the committee to take this and put it into a draft code that we can then have a discussion on. And it may be for the items that your subcommittee hasn't reached agreement on, like, is it 3 months? Is it 6 months? Is it 1 year? That section can say, here are some options there that we then can discuss. Did you have a comment?
Yeah, thank you very
Say.
much. The concern that I have is that the subcommittee's focus, of course, has been on affordable workforce housing. And my read of what has been proposed by Senator Huxtable is about ADUs. And the good work that the subcommittee has done on this is about creating a model and incentive program for people to not provide or expect market rent for ADUs. And I believe what the senator is proposing is the impetus is just more housing units. And I would suggest that if you are trying to address or include some parts of what his legislation, his bill addresses, that you actually need to open up your scope and possibly consider the impacts of ADUs, regardless of affordability, but the impact of ADUs on the Lewes community.
Okay. Could you take that to your committee as a comment?
I can. I think part of the answer would be that we would just get a lot more short-term rentals.
Yeah,
An Airbnb, it would be
Yeah.
yeah,
full stop on short-term rentals.
It's quite possible, but,
And, you know, I don't know that,
it seems to me that people, the incentives that you created here are an opt-in, opt-out kind of thing. If you're approving ADUs, then the person would have the option of going the route of making the units affordable or not, affordable rent. They can turn their backs on that and say, you know what, all I want is the ability to have a rental unit on my property, and open it up to.
I can see how many people would. I can imagine that we would have a lot of residents who would not think that was a great idea.
Yeah, I think part of the thinking of the subcommittee, if I can state it, is that what we were tasking them with was not to create more short-term rentals, but rather to create the kind of rentals that would be available to people who were living or working here. And so the possibility of having being able to build an ADU, you got that possibility while signing on to longer-term leases.
You know, but I understand that logic of not wanting, short-term leases. At the same time, we are a community that thrives on short-term leases. Quite frankly, our economy is driven by short-term leases. We are a vacation destination. And the idea of short-term leases being the anathema for this ADU, to me, doesn't make really much sense. And the other thing is that from the standpoint of, what is, looking out for the homeowner. The homeowner is going to invest $70,000, $80,000, $100,000 to convert their garage to an ADU. Some homeowners will just turn around and rent that or give it to a family member or something like that. But some homeowners will want a return on that investment. And so what is the incentive for a return on investment? Okay, the most money they can make is on a vacation short-term lease, no question. Or a longer-term lease at market rate, right? What is the incentive for them to turn around and rent that at a lower rate, other than we waive the off-street parking restriction or something like that, right? They have to have an incentive for the homeowner, okay? What is the incentive for the homeowner to do what the intention of this bill, what our actions are supposed to do, and that is provide affordable housing? There is no incentive, really. The only real incentive for homeowners like this is government subsidies, right? The government subsidize the building, and then they put terms into the lease that says it has to be at below market rate, right? But there is no real incentive here for them to do what we're asking to do, and that is lower your rent for affordability purposes. Unless,
So
Yeah,
this is,
I thought that the incentive was the tax, now, I'm, in a sense, I should turn to you to answer this question,
Yeah, no, we
Commissioner
have-
Heffernan, because you,
we have struggled with the incentive. And really it was that there not be a rental tax, that there be half of the license fee, that there be things like not a sprinkler system required, not a separate
water and sewer.
sewer and water, electricity service, which, can be very expensive. So that's what, but basically, we started out with, how do we introduce this idea and not get, and make some affordable housing and convince the community that we could manage, that the city could manage this in a way that would work. And until May 4th, the major concerns that we heard from the community were parking, historic district, architecture fitting in, and not too many and not short-term rentals. So that work has been delivered as far as I'm concerned.
And I suspect we're at the point where let's come back to the next meeting with something concrete. And perhaps because we, you know, our composition is different. And one thing that, we went through a series of presentations on the issues that our community is facing because we don't have affordable housing. So we won't have people, you're right, it's a, you know, a seashore, you know, beach destination, but we won't have people to work in our restaurants, to be nurses in our hospitals, or to teach our children if we don't have more affordable housing. We had some very compelling, if we think back on them,
Yeah.
Presentations
We
on
had that,
how
and there
serious the
that's where we
situation has
came from.
become. Yeah.
But I think Kevin brings up a good
Yeah.
point, which is, and he and I had a sidebar conversation about this. He said almost exactly what he said just a minute ago, and I responded, but the people who live here, you know,
Uh-huh.
want a different environment, want to live here. You know, it's their resident. They don't mind lots of visitors and guests, but they also want that wonderful third grade teacher to be able to teach their first grader in 2 years.
I would argue that the people who visit here also would like to buy a meal in a restaurant, and when they go to the hospital, would like somebody at the ER when they arrive, you know? So, but I take your point, yeah, I understand what you're saying.
Blue,
Needs your attention.
Okay, Deborah?
Yeah, I also wanted to jump in. Sorry that I'm not there tonight, Bob, but also, have been a member of this subcommittee from the beginning, and we explored every avenue, I felt like, of how we could incentivize this. It was a very, very fine line between giving too much away free, which a lot of homeowners will object to, and making it an incentive enough to create more housing units. And the goal that you've spoken of, Nancy, is just exactly where we have come from the very beginning on this. One thing that we have to remember is that just by creating this, even if we restrict the time periods and, you know, do all that we can not to make it a short-term rental opportunity, is just by creating the changes to allow the ADUs, we will be creating units every year. So, you know, we did dig deeply into this and have had guests in. Bob has been tremendous on looking out to other communities to see what's going on, and we thought we were someplace, and then the state, you know, thinks we had some upper level changes there. But anyway, you know, the goal is to create more units.
Could I just a couple of thoughts. One of them is that I think one of the most powerful incentives here would be to streamline the process for homeowners who are considering going in this direction. I know from my own perspective, that would be a huge incentive. If there were like one-stop shopping, you know, we can envision what that streamline might look like. But that would be something, that would be an enormous incentive, which may take just a composite of what you have already discussed, it sounds like. The other thing is that,
And Rich also, oh, I'm sorry, I wanted to.
go ahead, Deborah, please.
is that I had come into this thinking, you know, we are gonna ease, Janelle had suggested too, that we ease the gross receipts tax if people hit the income targets, the rental taxes, but I thought that perhaps the process was more onerous than it is on homeowners. It's actually very simple, we only have annual filing here, because I thought that would be an incentive, is giving people, you know, less filing and less paperwork, and actually Lewes, it's quite easy, so you don't, there's no point in pulling back on that. So I'm with you, I'm just reinforcing.
Great, thank you. The other thing is that in the open space subcommittee, we had a discussion, an idea which I think came from Commissioner Marasco, but it is to have, and we've looked at a few other ordinances, to have a preamble or a statement of purpose, which I see you've already started this, Commissioner Heffernan. I'm looking at your scope. It's got, you know, the lack of affordable housing for workers and lower income people has been well documented, and there's some of the stuff already here. But I think pulling it together in a very compelling statement of purpose, and this is what, at least and we've heard echoes of this, which have been very helpful to me anyway, that we do want to capture, as Commissioner Marasco said, the spirit of what Senator Huxtable is saying. We've all spoken with him, and he is coming from a very good place. Now, as we say, there is a difference here. You know, there's a, you know, the little bit of apples and oranges going on here, but there is some overlap. But just a clear statement that our intent is to try to get more housing units and more people to be able to use these in the way that we are trying to design it, and to not have a bunch of Airbnbs or VRBOs that are that would cut against what we're trying to accomplish, which is to have the third grade teachers and the EMT workers, et cetera, et cetera. So I think a clear statement of that purpose right at the beginning, and there is one here.
And we have, we do have one, and I guess what I'd like is to have this go to Alex to really go through it in detail now from a legal perspective, so that at our next meeting, we would have that to review and discuss.
I think we need it
Before the meeting.
we need it before the meeting. We need it soon, because we have another.
Oh,
you know,
sorry.
I'd like to get the committee.
I would like you guys to have a chance to talk about it and
Yeah.
come back to us with it, yes.
And
And so Alex, can we get it, when is your next meeting?
seems like this is the 30th, Janelle?
Yes, the 30th, that was verified today.
Can we get it several days in advance of that meeting, so you have a chance as a committee to read, review it, and come to your meeting prepared to really work on it? Does that work for you?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I really like Commissioner Marasco's suggestion to take the spirit of this and to translate it into our own language. And quite frankly, I think if there's one aspect of this that's going to be really, really fought against, is that the idea of there's no local control. I have a hard time believing this will pass in any form
Yeah.
with that in there. Now, taking that line out, it may have a better chance. But the idea of taking local control out of the hands of Dewey, all of us, I just have a hard time believing that's going to stick.
I wanted to also throw out some ideas on incentives, because I think Commissioner Hefner said that the subcommittee's been looking at that. So from the federal level, not related to this topic, but when EPA was struggling many years ago, how do we get more energy efficient appliances? They came up with the Energy Star program. And yes, it has data, but it's basically that symbol. You go, oh, I'll buy that dishwasher instead of that dishwasher. So what about, when you think about the property owner's difficulties, fast tracking, as Commissioner Ennis said, if we don't have that issue, which is a common issue, what I'm thinking about is an RFP that the city would put out, like an on-call. You know, cities have on-call contracts, right? They put an RFP out and they say, here are our engineering requirements. I don't mean the city consulting engineer, but electrical, plumbing, whatever. They're the Energy Star pre-approved because they've gone through it. Well, if I were a homeowner and I wanted to do this, and if the city put out an RFP for those, and I selected those, the city would already have gone through some evaluation of their pricing and their reputation, so there's a little confidence level that comes. Maybe there's something that, you know, I mean, federal contract law helps these kinds of things all the time that we could look at. So I think, oh, I'm gonna do this, and I see these 3 plumbers have already responded for this specific need. Okay, I'm not just saying on call to the city. We'd be very specific to put an RFP out to say, if you wanna serve this mission, bid here. Your rate structure, all those kinds of things are done ahead of time. And then when you build with one of those, you get the Energy Star label, okay, for this affordable housing is actually done through this process. That takes out a lot of the burden. The short-term rental issue is, you know, I feel like there's gotta be a moratorium. If you join this, you're not in that pool for whatever. But I think we should look at ways to secure this. And then I can imagine people who will say, you know, I want my grandmother to live there, or my mother-in-law, maybe not even the pricing, but I'm gonna take advantage of this program. That's how we as a city can move forward on a mission. So it's just an idea to throw out, but I saw the Energy Star program at EPA. That's a voluntary program, and it is so successful.
You know, I like that, I love that idea, by the way, and I think as we just take it a step further and, incentivize these contractors to lower their costs.
Exactly.
I mean, because really, if you think about it, it's really homeowner cost.
That's right.
It's really gonna make these things affordable.
Right.
If we can make it affordable for them to convert these things, right, then they have an incentive to turn around and
That's right.
rent it on an affordable level.
And who doesn't wanna be a contractor in that kind of a program, right?
Exactly.
It's good brand for them as well.
Yeah.
So I know in other jurisdictions, they have, so for streamlining, they have pre-approved building plans. If this is what you want to do, you know, like 1 bedroom, like the 900 square foot ADU or the 1,200 square foot ADU, they have construction plans that have already been pre-approved. You go, I want that one, and then you pick out like a normal house, the exterior and the finishings. But your permit process is much faster because you've already got a structure that's been approved. Because we'll see that with certain houses. If you're building this type of townhouse block, okay, the next time it comes in, these plans, they're the same plans. The permitting process is faster because these plans have already been approved. So that's something you could always look at as well, coming up with a couple of different designs that say, okay, these already have pre-approval from building perspective, which means you're going to get through the building permit process faster, unless you want to do something that's totally different, and then you'd have to go through the full permit process. That's something you could consider, and that would definitely be a streamlining process.
I think we've got a lot of ideas to throw back to you. So we've got a commitment in terms of when you'll get a draft, and you'll have a chance at your next meeting to kind of work with this, and then come back to us at our next meeting. We have a plan? Okay, we're going to move on to discussion, potential public comment, and possible recommendation to mayor and city council regarding changes to the city code section 197-72. Purpose, to explain that the code is consistent with FEMA guidelines and section 197-55. Building height, deleting subsection C to calculate building height for properties in the floodplains consistent with the rest of the city. And I will look to Commissioner Marasco to walk us through this.
Absolutely. So part of this really stems from, the subcommittee doesn't want to just create new things. We did want to meet our mission of addressing definitions. I just want the chair to know.
We appreciate it.
Remember that requirement that we not look at all the time. So in both these cases, our subcommittee members, Mr. Reardon made the motions in both cases, and Barbara Curtis and Melanie Moser. Plus it was made the second, and it was unanimous. These are clarifications. So the one related to the floodplain code, this is your second one, based on FEMA model ordinance. It's really important. We're in the National Flood Insurance Program. I don't know how to say that more clearly. We're in the program. By being in the program, you have to follow some rules. And those rules are critical to keep not only FEMA on your right side, but also to ensure that the insurance rates are that discounted rate. If a municipality mucks around in that, you run the risk, meaning the city runs the risk of getting FEMA angry. You don't really want FEMA angry, and they can actually, and they have done this, they actually can pull out your program and you can't re-enter for a couple of years, or they can downgrade you. Lewes has, and I really give great commendation to our city planner and our consulting engineers. We have very good rating, and we can even do better. What this ordinance does is it says, everything that you read below, it's FEMA. And I'll point out, as I said in early meetings, our subcommittee member, Barbara Curtis, not knowing it was all FEMA mandated, questioned about every line, okay? Until we actually said, you can't. And then as soon as that happened, Dennis Reardon and others said, then let's make that clear in the ordinance, because we don't want everybody to go through that same process that poor Ms. Curtis had to do. So that's really what you see in adding the FEMA model ordinance that our subcommittee said. That's just clarity. And then the other one, and Janelle, city planner, may have some more comments about the height. That was a cleaning up from leftover language that didn't make sense, so we did that. So in my opinion, to my fellow colleagues, saying that the floodplain code is based on the FEMA model ordinance is just the anchor we have to do in terms of FEMA.
Is there any discussion on this before we vote? Do we have a motion?
Can I do both at the same time?
Yes, exactly.
Okay, so I would move that the recommendations from the environmental subcommittee on the strikeouts related to the building height, and also on adding that the floodplain code is based on the FEMA model ordinance, be passed by this planning commission.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Commissioner Evalds, on the, are you in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. It's unanimous.
Yes, I'm in favor.
Unanimous of those present. Okay, we have no new business. And we are in good shape. We have a tree canopy presentation. There, okay. And do you have a sense of how long your presentation is?
I'm thinking like 15 minutes,
Okay.
maybe.
Okay. And can we have an introduction? Brett, would you like to do the introductions here?
This is Carly LeComte, one of our environmental scientists at GMB.
And she did this wonderful tree study on the behalf of the Planning Commission.
It is a pleasure to have you here to present this to us.
Thank you. Yeah, so if you can see on the screen, I created an online interactive map that you can use to visualize the tree canopy change between 2011 and 2021. Currently, the 2022 and 2023 data is not available. The data came from the U.S. Forest Service, and you can see with the variation in colors that the darker green indicates a denser forest cover, where white indicates zero or very little forest canopy coverage. So if you click inside the municipal boundary, a new pop-up window will show, and that will give you data on the year, the percentage of the tree canopy, as well as the acreage of the municipal boundary. So that changed throughout time with annexations, and which ultimately can change your tree canopy coverage value when you're gaining more land. So originally, they came to GMB with a goal at saying we're 38% tree canopy coverage is what Lewes wants to see. And that was based off of data that came from 2014. That showed Lewes at being at 33.8%. Now, this is not data that is shown here. This is just a little bit of background. So the data that came from 2014 was from the Vermont Spatial Analyst Lab data, and I actually got in touch with the person who created that data. His name is Jimmy Kroon, and he works for the Delaware Department of Agriculture. So he used the Vermont Spatial Analyst Lab data, which included aerials, LiDAR, and vector data sets. And the cells that were analyzed of this data were at 1 square meter. His canopy coverage also did not include any open water. So the canal was cut out. I'm sure Blockhouse Pond may have also been cut out in some of the areas of the Delaware Bay. He does note, though, that unfortunately, because this data was so precise, it made it harder to compare to other years. So statewide, most cities that he also ran this model for saw a 10% increase in canopy. So when I also spoke to Taryn Davidson from the Delaware Forest Service, she had stated that with that 2014 data at 33.8%, if we did include water, it would be at roughly 25.4%. When I ran the model using the U.S. Forest Service data, I came up with 17.513%, so significantly lower. The way that I calculated the data was following the workflow from Eric Reed, who's also part of the Delaware Department of Agriculture. And what we did was essentially clip the whole data file comes from the U.S. Forest Service, and we clip it to the municipal boundary of Lewes. And then within that, there are 30 by 30 meter cells. And each cell contains a percentage of tree canopy, which is what I was describing earlier, that the darker green might be, say, 97% coverage, where the white might be 0 or, say, 7% coverage. So when we multiplied those out, that's how I got the tree canopy percentage. Again, in my work, I did include water because initially that was not part of the scope to take it out. So to run through the results briefly, in 2011, we saw a tree canopy coverage of 16.909%. In 2012, 17.285%. 2013, 17.513%.
What was that number again, please?
17.513%.
Hey, Tim, this is online. You can
Okay.
zoom into that.
I'll do that. I had not done that. Thank
And we can see the bar graph underneath is showing the,
you. Got it.
2014 was the same at 17.513%. 2015, 18.005%. 2016 was the highest at 18.31%. 2017 was 17.94%.
Okay, Carly, could
Yeah.
you just zoom into the year you're just leaving, whatever it was, 2017 or 16?
60.
And look at, a lot of that seems to be like the 4th Street Forest. Okay,
but why did it go up so much in 2016? It isn't as if trees were planted there in 2016. Was this a matter of annexation or what?
So annexation did occur in 2015. That brought us up to the 18.005%. I do have.
And when it's annexed in, it's empty or blank canvas, so it's not fully built out yet.
I see
So
what
you're going to
saying.
eat away. But even so, plus 2016 was Jonas, so there's a little bit of decline from winter storm and losing trees. Sometimes when you get, you know, freeze on a tree, it takes 3 years to get it down.
I'm just trying to understand between 2014 and 2016, it's almost doubled. What would account for that? I mean, trees weren't
No,
growing that quickly.
it's only gone up about 1% between that time period.
Oh, I see, it's a truncated, I understand
Yeah.
now. You-
Yeah, but still.
There's a little
Your
bit of
x-axis
good
is
growth.
not zero.
Right.
It's
Exactly.
16.5,
Yes.
I understand. Okay,
Yes.
it's not nearly the increase that, okay,
In fact, it's very stable.
it's very stable.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I believe, okay, so 2016 was the highest, 18.31%. 2017, 17.94%. 2018, 17.71%. 2019, 17.63%. 2020, 17.55%. And 2021, 17.41%. I also looked at north and south of the canal, and to indicate that, I just drew a line through the middle of the canal to separate the north and south. Those are both relatively the same, where the north side was at 17.402% and the south side was at 17.413%.
So
And
just,
Nancy, I wanted to add in that I was at another meeting where we shared this and we discussed the annexation, dates and kind of, you know, played with what sort of impact that might have had. Some of these we added in wooded areas, and then soon after there were developments, but just for some landmarks here. From 2015 to 2016, even though there was a small increase, that was when, if I'm not mistaken, we annexed Highland Acres. So theoretically, that should have been a large increase. But the fact that it wasn't tells me that we lost a lot at the same time. Then going up to 2017, that was Mariners Retreat site work began. And then 2018, we annexed the Birmingham parcel, Lewes Waterfront Preserve, but there was not a lot of forested.
Yeah.
There was not a lot of forest on that property to begin with, even though we have less now. So some of those landmarks, I think, do play with the data a little.
I mean, they, Carly, you probably have more you want to present before we talk, or you have more?
Oh, no,
You're
that's
good.
essentially.
I mean, you know, the numbers show we're horribly stable. Okay, I mean, that's really what they show is, yes, where some development is changing some of it, but had we thought we were in the 30s, you know, that's a different goal.
Yeah.
I mean, I think what this data shows is we have a serious tree canopy problem. And trees, when you briefed the environmental subcommittee, I can't remember exactly, was it about 3 years before a tree can leaf out enough to be captured in the data? Was it something, like a little sapling doesn't make it?
Yes,
Right.
yes, it will take time because we're looking at 30 by 30
Right.
square meters, which is essentially like an acre, where the way the algorithm works, it's harder for it to pick up.
Right, right.
Yes.
So I know that when you presented to us, the environmental subcommittee's response really was, these are not good numbers, these are stable numbers. We need a tree canopy goal and a very specific plan to be there. So a goal in itself is not going to get us there. We're actually going to have to calculate how many trees do we need to get to our goal, where those trees are going to be planted, and how much money that's going to be. In other words, it needs a full, robust program to get us even close to where we thought where we were. They also did a calculation Carly's group on the carbon. You know, you look at our carbon footprint and you can calculate how many trees do you need to get us to neutral. The number's so high, it's not even worth sharing. So that probably isn't going to be possible. I mean, but the fact is, you know, I know when I look at it and when my fellow subcommittee members looked at it, we thought this needed to be a high priority for mayor and city council to actually embrace what this means, what we can do. We know that the two biggest environmental issues for the city of Lewes are flooding and heat. Flooding has lots of things. This is a really straightforward way to address heat by really creating tree canopy. And one thing that we talked about too was the city only has a limited place they can put trees, parks, street trees. So looking at not regulating private properties at all, but really developing a public outreach program so people who want more trees on their property could get more assistance, whether that's the Forest Service giving away trees, which happens very often throughout the United States, but also some tech assistance as well. So there are a lot of elements to make this real, but I think this is, you know, you guys did a fabulous effort that I know Deborah's subcommittee wanted it, we wanted it, and the Planning Commission wanted it. But I think what's most important here is we need to turn this around.
Can I ask a question about the study?
I'd like to jump right in. Oh, sorry, Melanie.
Yeah, I would like to know if you're looking at, what was it, 30 square meters?
Yes.
Was your cell?
Yes.
Are you really picking up like street trees, isolated street trees?
See, I don't run the data model or the algorithm. I essentially just calculated the tree canopy percentage based off of the U.S. Forest Service. So I would have to delve a little bit deeper into how they collect their data. My guess is yes, is that they do pick it up in the sense that they create a radius within, they call it a plot. And within that radius is about 100 and so X marks. And that falls within if it's on a tree or if it's not. So it is pretty high resolution that I would imagine that it would pick up street trees, but I'm not entirely sure.
Lou, if you look at, zoom into Ship Carpenter Square, you can sort of see what that looks like.
Yeah,
And it gives it a score.
there's a color gradient for each 30 by 30 that fits within like a 10%.
Yeah, and you can see
range.
it if you look in the upper right-hand corner there. And
Yeah, and
click
if
on
you
that little-
started grabbing squares, it would give you a percentage of the 30 by 30.
Looks like it's picking it up.
But it's running that algorithm. If it shows up, probably I would say more than 5 feet wide, it's going to capture it.
And yeah, you can see it is picking up individual trees there.
But move over towards Second Street and see what gets picked up.
Oh, there's our house.
And you see how the color gradient changes a little bit on the squares.
And you can see the squares.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Does that pick up Phragmites also?
That would be pretty awesome if it did.
And if you
It
go
doesn't
up
count
to
as
the-
a shade tree.
Lou, if you go to the upper right-hand corner and that little mnemonic up there, no, don't move the map. Just go, little gray box right there. You can futz around and it will show you kind of what its scale is. What it's going from brown to green or green to brown and
Yeah,
how it's
yeah.
scoring it.
Other questions? I mean, I think that, first of all, I think this has been very helpful for us to see. I
Yeah,
guess, like-
now it's nice now because you can compare when we what I was given before, we were comparing different ways of
Yeah.
analyzing tree canopy coverage. Now this is analyzing it all in one way.
So we've got an apples to apples comparison. I guess my reaction looking at this is, I see, I'm reassured that it hasn't changed drastically, okay? And it certainly, compared to 2011, we're up a little bit overall. Not much, but a little bit. But it also but it means we're not losing at the rate that I thought we might be. But the question, I think that's the really important one, which you alluded to, Commissioner Marasco, is, you know, to move this 1 percentage point, how many trees would it take? And over how many years? Because the year you plant the tree, it's not going to make much of a difference here.
Right, right.
Could I just say, there are a couple of things. One is certainly the incentives to get more trees. I am a little surprised, given, you know, what is it, Fisher's, you know, some of the major developments that have gone on, Mariners Cove, you know, where we just saw, you know, trees being bulldozed, you know, that it hasn't had more impact. So I'm a little surprised by that. But it also underscores for me the need for a really strong buffer ordinance, both for the county, but also, you know, that is an area where we can have an impact on canopy loss and also canopy addition. And then also this incentive idea just for, you know, public education. And we did some of that when we had the workshop here.
It'd be really interesting to see the canopy percentages of the areas immediately surrounding Lewes, New Road, those areas where the development has been the heaviest, and what that's done to our overall canopy level. I mean, if you talk about quality of life, it doesn't count, you know, the borders don't matter, right? It's about everything. So it depends on, you know, I'd love to see what those numbers are. Is there an optimum number we're looking for when we talk about 17, 18%? Is there a number we should be shooting for from a standpoint of a healthy environment?
Well, City Council did set a number, but that was based on what looks like a different set of measurements. And what was it, 30?
It was 34, the goal was 38.
Yes.
Yeah,
But
It was 34%.
yeah,
was the goal.
yeah. So, but that wasn't assuming we were starting at 17.
And I did look further into that data set to see if I could run it through other years, but they only had it for 2014.
Okay.
And the other thing is,
It's hard to jump in when you're on mute, but now am I talking over Bob?
go ahead.
Okay, I just wanted to say, one thing that we can't underestimate here is that we are not progressing in the manner that we should be. We are not making the progress or meeting the goals. Whether or not we're looking, which set of numbers we're looking at, the goal is to have real growth, and we're not seeing it. And furthermore, I think it is very important to analyze the annexation of different properties within this, because there are some annexations that have occurred that should have really bumped us up, and they didn't. They just kind of held things down. And I'm just going to shoot back to the work that we worked on with the tree committee. We've been successful in getting, you know, a few things, the tree planting requirement in particular, but I still think the protection of our heirloom trees, our really landmark trees in Lewes, is still something that we should aspire to and that we should address. And I think everybody knows, but I still think the only real answer to protect the trees that we have is to have a tree ordinance that regulates, you know, institutes a process if you want to remove large trees.
I was just gonna say that the link to this data, if you decide to delve into it, is in tonight's agenda. So you can save that somewhere and, you know, argue about how much we annexed or something.
This has been incredibly helpful, and we appreciate it. And I think it's food for thought, and not just thought, but action, which we'll need to take into consideration at a follow-up meeting. But thank you very much.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
Thank
Madam
you.
Chair, one thing that I think we should, as a planning commission, look at is interim goals.
Mhm.
I wouldn't want to see a planning commission 10 years from now having this kind of data. So if we if we even took the goal that mayor and city council set based on assuming a different, baseline, then what's your goal in 5 years? What's its intent? So you can have mid-course corrections as need be. So I think it's really important that we don't just have an aspirational goal, we have a on-the-ground goal, and we check on it and we check on it. And then other things that Deb said I think are very important.
Measurable.
And measurable, absolutely.
And I mean, I think the value here is that we now have a measurement system.
Yes, exactly.
But we need not just the goal, but we need to know what's the level of action or activity that's required to even move towards that goal, which I don't think we, what does it take to up at 1%? What does it take to?
Well, we also may want to set goals for new subdivisions to have a certain amount of
Exactly.
tree coverage.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
That's really important, I think, Commissioner, I'm sorry, so I'm just thinking Melanie. We look at a development plan, and I think we've done a really good job in the last year to try to get more trees a little closer together. But maybe that is something to say, yes, we have a review on that. Oh, and by the way, you also need another 5%. You figure out where you want them, we're not, but you need X% so that these developments that do have to take some trees down, we've all learned that, of course, actually find a way to put in more in the places and locations that they choose. I think that would be one of the turning things that we could do, and that the mayor.
And if a grove is being taken down,
Yes, then,
are there locations that we've identified in the city that can accommodate the planting of additional trees?
right.
Mitigation.
Because with coverage, with the level of coverage that's permitted, you can't.
Yeah.
You may not be able to always accommodate it on
And
the.
some recognition on awards, like 100th new tree planted,
Yeah.
things like that catch on, like the governor has a tree for every Delawarean, and there's some money in that program, obviously, that the city's taken advantage of. I just think we need those markers so that you would have as an annual environmental report to the citizens, how are we doing? How are we doing on all these environmental topics?
Usually get the schools involved.
Yep, absolutely.
Now, is this something that the environmental subcommittee, I'm looking at, we've identified an issue here. I'm trying to think of which subcommittee are we giving this to?
Right.
Or do you reconstitute the tree committee
Or reconstitute.
Yeah.
commission,
We asked for-
subcommittee?
Yeah, we asked for the presentation because what we're looking at is also forest protection.
Yeah.
But then when we saw this data, we had the same reaction you're having,
Yeah.
is who takes this? We'll happy
Yeah.
to take it, or do we reconstitute the tree? But somebody's got to take it,
Yeah.
however you want to do it.
I guess because it came from you and because I think you guys are nearing completion on a whole series of things, I wouldn't see why we wouldn't just, unless someone has another idea, why wouldn't just continue on? And it would be great perhaps to add some members from the tree subcommittee
Yes.
To join you in this, from the former tree subcommittee, to join you in it.
That'd be fine on
Okay.
our end.
Can I just wanted to give one quote from a man of letters, a famous American doctor on this. He said, "I am the Lorax who speaks for the trees, which you seem to be chopping as fast as you please. Unless someone like you cares a whole awful lot, nothing is going to get better. It's not."
Words to live by.
Thank you. Okay, thank you again, and let's give a round of applause. Okay, we are now on to our reports. Environmental Subcommittee?
Yes, we have been focusing on wetlands and buffers. We have had several sessions to air a variety of issues. And as we've done on other proposals, we then take a little SWAT team to kind of work on them. And so Barbara Curtis either volunteered or I signed her, I can't remember. But Barbara and Brent and Michaela, myself, and Janelle have been working on the language. We'll be ready sometime in May, and we've got a few more times to bring it through our subcommittee. But what's important is we are looking at a very clear purpose statement. We've been learning that people don't always understand the value of wetlands, the value, the visual value, but the water quality value, all those different stormwater management value. We've been watching what the county's been doing, these perimeter buffers, which those aren't an overlay district, I don't know what is, and so we keep pushing Alex to say, why can't we do these things in overlay? But what I want to share with you is we are about ready to have a draft that's based on science, based on input we've received from scientific groups, balancing what is done on private lots. But where we're headed is big lots. So where we're going to have the biggest impact is properties that are large enough who have wetlands on them to protect them. Tiny little lots in Lewes, where it's probably going to be an educational role because there's not enough room for them to maneuver. But on the large lots, which might be falling at about 2 acres and up, so those aren't that many lots, we're going to be recommending that we look at, I believe we're going to be recommending that we look at what is done onto those lots. And also, obviously, any subdivision, major or minor. That's where we're headed at this point. We're also headed to talk about, right in the preamble, the value of the buffer. And the Cape Gazette, we did not put that cartoon in the Cape Gazette, but that cartoon is hilarious, whoever put that in. If you haven't seen it yet, it's like, my buffer's getting crowded, how can I come on yours? But I think that's the reality, is that we've got so many competing demands. And there are a lot of people that want us to, not want us, but are looking at structural activities. So what we would like is, if the Planning Commission wants to, we would like to present, not that necessarily environmental subcommittee, Brent could be presenting from GMB at hopefully our next meeting, because then we could follow up with maybe a draft ordinance. Getting all of us, I've learned so much about wetlands in the last 4 weeks, and I thought I knew something about wetlands. So if Brent could come, just like he did for the free board, not that lengthy, we promise, and Brent promises. But we want to make sure everybody here has all of those questions before we would be presenting ordinance. So we're finishing up that, and then next on our plate, though Melanie has been so patient, is dark sky lighting, and how to focus that. I would love to see us to be a dark sky community. That's going to be a lot of requirements. So it's what are the baby steps that we can take to start moving that forward? Maybe it's street trees or, street lights. But that'll be the next thing that's on our plate.
Great, thank you. Yes.
Okay.
Open space.
Okay. We had a meeting, a very productive meeting, where we talked about coming up with a purpose statement for open space, and also, find my notes here. Here we go. Whether it should apply in a residential density applicability, and should it apply to non-residential also? And maybe that is just a change in the coverage number rather than calling it open space. We also discussed an idea of requiring buffers only to count towards about 50% of the open space, rather than today they count as 100% towards the open space. So we're going to come up with new metrics for open space and subdivisions. So we've looked at several other jurisdictions, definitions, and requirements, notably Asheville, North Carolina, and Kennebec Valley, and the other one that you sent. And then we gave an assignment to the intern to pull together the purposes and definitions from these other jurisdictions. And we're also going to look at what the other coastal towns are doing. Our next meeting is April 23rd at 11:30.
Fantastic. Housing Subcommittee.
We have a lot of work to do.
Okay, I was just gonna say, I don't know whether you have anything to add aside from, we went through a lot today. Okay, let's hear from our liaisons. Ms. Curtis.
Nothing to report, thank you.
Councilman, I say Commissioner, Councilman Ritzert.
Thank you. I do want to provide you all with a reminder that next week, the DPW and the City Council are having a joint meeting, and this is a quarterly meeting, and it's scheduled for Monday, the 22nd, at 3 p.m. It will be held in Rollins, and one particular presenter that I think might be interesting to you all is the Census Conservation District. And I'm not sure, well, I heard Jessica Walton will be there, and her boss will be there, will be present as well. His name I don't think I have. Okay, I can't find it right now. Anyway, they're gonna be there, and I think that should be a very interesting conversation, and we hope to learn more about what they actually do, the services they provide, and we're very dependent on their review of
Mhm.
plans as it
Exactly,
relates
yeah.
to stormwater.
As we know.
Very, very dependent.
And just for the minutes, is it Jackie who's doing the minutes? I would just like to record that Commissioner Moser had to leave early. Mr. Burns.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't have much to report, just very quickly, just tracking some legislation that might impact the Planning Commission. For example, I saw some draft legislation at the state level impacting the requirements of a comprehensive plan. I don't think it'll necessarily affect Lewes, but there's going to be potentially going to be a requirement that comprehensive plans address climate change, and Lewes already does that, but that'll be an emphasis moving forward. If no one mentioned it already, I think there's going to be another tree presentation at a upcoming council meeting, and that's about it.
Thank you. City Planner Cornwell.
Thank you. So the mayor and council did adopt the new impervious surface definitions. Excuse me, and they adopted the tree protection construction ordinance. So those are now both in effect. And excuse me, the record for freeboard and lot coverage is open till April 26th at 4.
Thank you. Now, I noticed there were some public comments online, and can we have those? And then I'll go to people in the room.
Yes, so the comments, both from George Terrell, both regarding the tree canopy thing. We lost some canopy in 2015 in Dog Park, but they have recently replaced several. Murray Thompson is also working with the state to plant trees in the buffer hedgerow between Canary Creek development and the field lease for farming. You have space to increase canopy between American Legion Road and Cape Henlopen Drive, where you've lost federal emerging wetland forest buffer.
Thank you. Any other comments? Is there anyone in the room who would like to come forward to ask a question or make a comment? Okay.
Thank you. I do want to bring to y'all's attention that although the mayor is not here in person, he has been listening to this meeting by telephone.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, he has been present.
Thank you. Okay, I think it's that time, and I would like to point out that we are finishing 25 minutes early. I don't think I have to vote to adjourn, right? The meeting, it is now 8:04 PM, and the meeting is adjourned.